Thank you very much. So moving on to our next keynote speaker, moving from ping pong balls to tennis balls. We've got Arran Peck, currently the strength and conditioning coach at the Lawn Tennis Association, but has a long list of sporting teams and groups that he's worked with in the past. So I'll hand over to you, Arran. You can do your own little introduction if you like, but thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Glenn, for that introduction, and thank you, Sylvia and Glenn, for inviting me to speak to the first Acrobatic Symposium. My normal environment is gyms, dumbbells, and stopwatches. So audiences and microphones and presentations is a little bit out of my comfort zone. So hopefully you'll bear with me through the next hour. Also, thank you, of course, for making it all the way through to the end of day two. There's less numbers now than there were before lunch, so some people have snuck away, I notice. A couple of points of note before we start. I've got my timer on this and I know how long I'm lasting. A couple of things to mention before I start the presentation. Firstly, the post-lunch session is always a tricky one, and although the presentation will largely be talking about recovery and rest, it's not a practical presentation, so I don't want to catch anybody sleeping in the background. Otherwise, we'll drag them out there out in front for the demos. Secondly, I have no real idea of your individual backgrounds and your previous exposure to exercise science, sports science, that kind of thing. So if you've read or heard any of the research that we'll go through today in your coaching pathways to date, I do apologise and just consider it revision. If some of the science is a bit too much or a bit too heavy, then I'm very happy to provide both the slides and the references that I might use. But you can continue your learning, although I do understand you are doing some work with cadavers this morning, so it's not quite as heavy science as that. Thirdly, I am these days at least acutely aware of the different disciplines that make up the Circus Arts, but for the purpose of today I'll kind of group them all as one. So I'm doing that deliberately. I'm very aware that obviously the different disciplines come with different challenges, different lengths of training, different skill sets. But that said, the physical nature of the training and performances of circus performers leads me, at least, to think of them as circus athletes and not just circus artists. So that's not me trying to be provocative, and hopefully we can discuss that terminology and discuss some of the things that come out of that at the end of the presentation. So I feel it's important to give you a bit of context about myself and the nature of the work that I do. As Glenn mentioned, my name is Arran Peck and I work as a physical trainer, and I have worked in elite sport for over 15 years now. I consider myself very lucky to call that my job. It started off with my interest and I've now made a career out of it, so I'm very lucky. After finishing my academic studies, I spent a period of time volunteering for different football clubs, different hockey teams, different swimming teams, offering them my insight and my skills and my time. On the back of that I was given the opportunity to work on a government-funded scheme called the EIS, the English Institute of Sport. That was in and around 2001. And after 2 Olympic cycles working for those guys, delivering to, I think, somewhere in the region of 150 different athletes across 30 different sports and across 10 different training centres, I then took an opportunity to go and work in professional rugby, which was followed by my current job working in professional tennis, and indeed a consultancy role working in a Premier League football club. Not the same one as Will was working at yesterday, a team that's actually higher placed than the one that was representing. I'm pleased he's not here, otherwise we'd come to blows. But I know what you're thinking. You're looking at this, look at this little guy up on the stage and you're thinking, he's not a sprinter and he's not a judo player, and he's definitely not a top class netball player, and he's definitely never played wheelchair rugby. Or wheelchair basketball. Those are a couple of the sports, some of the athletes that I've worked with across time. I snuck in a Circus Arts picture in the corner there by virtue of the fact it's not the first time I've been to this building. So, but I didn't work with those guys. That's a bit of a leap of faith. But all of those guys are athletes that I've worked with. But you're right. I never participated at the level that they're participating in. Even though I tried my hand at many of them, I'm not very good at all of them. So, but the factors underpinning success in all of those sports are fairly well known. Kind of what it takes to win, that concept. and the training science that's required to achieve physical adaptation and physical development in both of those sports and others is well researched. And it's pretty much the same regardless of the sport. The body is the body, and you're just applying the same rules to adaptation to the different sports and the different needs of the sports. So in the case of each of the athletes that I work with there, my role primarily is to identify and correct imbalance and dysfunction. So my current sport is tennis. No, I don't work with Rafa Nadal, so don't get too excited, but a very good example, you see him walking onto court, his one side of his body is very much more defined and very much bigger than the other. We have a hand balancer there. Again, the nature of that sport means a lot of work happens on one arm at any one time. And down the bottom there is an example of the kind of inequality that you're dealing with, or I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis in my sport. We have a very successful multi-Grand Slam winner, and he's the shorter of the two, versus the other guy who is 1.5 foot taller than him, serves absolute cannons, but isn't quite as mobile. In addition to that, my job is to try and develop stability, rigidity, I suppose, also robustness at key joints. Again, you can just see some of the challenges that performers and athletes face. The primary purpose of my job, I suppose, as a strength and conditioning coach, as I'm often referred, is to develop the strength and increase the efficiency. I say efficiency in terms of reducing the unit cost of any piece of work or the impact of work. So down the bottom there we have a parkour exponent jumping from one side of a subway entrance to the other. That's no mean feat in itself, the distance that he's covering, but when he's landing, he needs to not only stabilise but also be efficient in his landing, then reproduce that movement again and again and again. There's also an element of improving athleticism. So I've said jump height and jump distance there. Weightlifters, as an example, are often thought about just being very strong. Well, there he is leaping off the floor, having just won a gold medal in Athens. That's no small jump height he's achieved there. Relative to his body height as well, actually, he's only a small fella. So, but again, we have examples of non-traditional sports performances or sports athletic performances. And we had a presentation earlier. You guys had a presentation earlier from Adele regarding dance. And again, that's no mean athleticism being displayed by our ballerina down there. There's also an element of developing a capacity to train. So hopefully the sports coaches themselves will develop that quality mostly, but I can certainly assist that. So I can do work to help that sports coach allow that athlete to train for as many hours as they need to. We have up the top here kind of cross-training methods to achieve that outcome. We have long-distance runners doing weight training. Of course, the long-distance runners synonymous with doing lots and lots of volume of work. So even though the nature of the work that I would do with them is very much lower repetition, higher weight, more intense bouts of work, it's nonetheless important for those endurance athletes. An often unappreciated part of the role is to maximise recovery, to minimise overtraining and the risk of injury. So that would cover everything from nutrition to flexibility there to kind of more novel interventions of recovery. Again, I haven't asked Mo's permission to put that picture up there, but they're widely available on Google Images, so I presume at some point he's given permission to someone to use those. Latterly, it's sometimes the most challenging part of the job, sometimes the most interesting part of the job, but it's often the most frustrating for the athlete's perspective, providing kind of end-stage rehab and that return to play post-injury. So you'd hope that your athletes never get injured, but in elite sport it's commonplace. Probably comes with the territory, and my job would be to potentially integrate between the sports physicians, the sports physios, and before they hit the kind of full return to competition. I think the next presentation will be based around injury, and hopefully James will elaborate on that for you. So ultimately, my job is to optimise the physical readiness of elite athletes for a long and successful career in their chosen sport. Okay. So what am I doing here? I suppose is more pertinent. Well, my first exposure to Circus Arts was as a paying customer. At a number of festivals, and going to watch touring companies People like Cirque, Seven Fingers, and shows like Canteen and Limbo. So I paid the money and turned up and watched those performances. Whilst everyone in the crowd is wowed, by the things that they do, I suppose I sat there with a slightly more unique view on things. I had an appreciation not only of the dedication of the training that it would have taken to have got to that point, but also the physicality required to perform as I look at them, the stunts that they're performing. Skills, I think, as probably the artist would call them. And I suppose my professional curiosity and a number of phone calls and a bit of dogged determination led me to the circus space here. Excuse me, what was formerly referred to as the circus space. After a number of visits and the opportunity to meet and present with both the students and the staff, I started to gain a better understanding of the diverse background of the performers, the different skills that were involved in the circus arts, the culturally normal but very scientifically non-traditional methods of training that the performers use to achieve those outcomes, and also to an extent the paucity of the data and the studies that were available to help those teachers and help those students develop or become better. So within the time restrictions placed upon me today, the kind of outcomes that I set out for the session. Firstly, to review the training science that underpins all the physical work that I do and underpins the physical development that your performers and your artists will go through. Secondly, a swift look at the importance of recovery in itself and how that sits within the scientific literature. And lastly, a brief look at some examples of how to organise a session, organise a day, organise a week to optimise optimise the recovery of your performers. So therefore, the ultimate aim of the session today is to optimise the physical readiness of circus artists for a long and successful career as circus performers. So I very sneakily just transposed the word athlete for circus there. And I know it's a topic that's come up both yesterday and already today. I would love to say it was deliberate and I was prompted to do that, but it isn't. It's my interpretation. I think it's very important we have those discussions. So in terms of principles of training, what are the principles of training from a sports science perspective, that underpin physical development? They're pretty intuitive, pretty simple principles at work. They're very well researched and reviewed across a number of years, and in my eyes, they're non-negotiable laws of adaptation to achieve adaptation. Okay. Firstly, we're not all created equal. Yeah? I watched a fantastic warm-up session in one of the other gym spaces earlier, and I simply couldn't do that. I have a lot of physical skills, rhythm, coordination, timing, definitely not one of mine. Okay, so we're not all created equal, and when it comes to physical development, the rate and magnitude of changes is limited by both your genetics, so the luck of the draw, luck of genetics, picking your parents carefully, and also training history. Okay, so with extensive training you can improve, okay, but only to an extent, limited often by your genetics. There's a graph up on there. It doesn't have a light, does it? Doesn't have a. I'll use my finger to point. Okay. Two different athletes, a beginner and a well-trained athlete. The physical fitness up here is represented on the y-axis. Training load across the bottom. The amount of work required to achieve development for the beginner versus the athlete is very different. Okay, their fitness obviously is distinguished across here. The amount of work and the time taken to achieve that is very different. Okay, so very simplistic terms. As if by magic. Thank you. Here we go. Look. I feel like a proper scientist now. So we have a beginner down here. We have our elite athlete here. The period of time taken in this retraining load is hugely different, and the time taken to achieve and the actual gains made will be very different depending upon the level of this athlete. We have the law of accommodation here. Okay, so our performance gain across the top, training load and training time across the bottom. higher gains will be made at the start, and if you apply the same load, the same type of training over time, then the gains are going to get less and less and less. Okay, so if you apply the same thing that you've done all the time, you're going to get the same. It's going to reduce limited law of diminishing returns. Okay, applying the same load over time, your gains are going to be less. Thirdly, progressive overload here. So if I'm providing a stimulus, there's going to be a period of fatigue to that stimulus. I'm going to recover, and by the end of that period of recovery, I'm going to be achieving a slightly higher level of performance. I then reapply a load, and again I go through a period of recovery. Up here to a second load, I'll reapply a stimulus. Same process happens again and again and again. Okay, and over time my fitness increases. But you must be a progressive overload. If you if you're trying to apply too much load too quickly, either this period of recovery takes too long, or you don't actually make it back up to your baseline again, let alone a positive. Law of reversibility. Okay, so we have a similar graph here. An untrained individual apply a training load over time, but what happens if at this point here you stop training? Go through a process called detraining. If we detrain, then over time, our performance levels, our physical development will regress. Okay, unfortunately, regression is actually quicker than progression. This happens far quicker in most people. If I intervene and apply a retraining load, I can get back up to where I was before. Okay, but likewise, it's going to take some time to achieve that. But in terms of reversibility, you use it or you lose it. If you stop training, then you'll lose the gains that you've made to date. Okay. The law of specificity. Very simply, the degree of transfer to performance is determined largely by the size, the rate and the direction of forces that are applied. Okay. No flashy graph for that one, I'm afraid. And lastly, this principle here, which is what we'll spend most of our time talking about today. Probably described and researched as early as the 1950s. It's gone through a couple of different transformations and rephrased and reworked a little bit, but in principle, it's called the general adaptation syndrome. Okay, stimulus, fatigue, resistance, and adaptation. Follows a simple principle, very similar to our previous graph here, in terms of applying multiple training stimuluses over time. We apply an overload. We talked about our overload here. Apply your overload, your stimulus. After your stimulus is applied, there's a period of fatigue. Okay, that period of fatigue is limited, is determined by, we talked about earlier, your genetics and your training history, and by the extent of this overload. There's a period of recovery. That again is limited by your own genetics. And hopefully there's an overcompensation. You return after that period of recovery slightly faster, slightly stronger than you were before. To give you the first indication of the importance of recovery, I've popped this little chart up here. Supercompensation refers to this period here, this block here, the period after the recovery. Different models. Okay, this is demonstrating the importance of an appropriately planned recovery period. So in this first instance, we'll call it supercompensation. There's a positive response. The stimulus is applied, so you've gone down to the gym, you've done some work. Okay, you've done some work. There's a recovery period in the next 1-2 days. Okay, and over that next 2 days, you start to recover. You go back to the gym 2-3 days later. You apply a different load. You go and do another gym session. Likewise, same thing happens, and if you apply enough recovery, the next 2 or 3 days later, you go back in and you're slightly stronger still. And you would apply that principle. Over time, that line, that green arrow there, is a slightly positive slant on it, slight incline. Okay? In the second example here, there's a slightly bigger supercompensation achieved. Whether that's a result of you as an individual, the load that you're applying, or the recovery period that you followed. Ultimately, that incline is slightly higher. The gains are slightly faster. And the gains are more. Okay, the rate and magnitude of those gains. So by here, we're far stronger, far faster, far fitter than we were in that example. But still, a supercompensation has been achieved. On the flip side, Actually, I'll skip one. We'll go to this one down here. Supercompensation, positive accumulated. So, although in this example here, we've applied a second load and then a third load, whilst we've under-recovered, by the time that third load has been applied, and we recover, there's actually a supercompensation by the end. So that length of the recovery has allowed us to achieve bigger adaptation at the end. Okay, so it goes against the principles of the ones we've seen here. Okay, we're training, planned overreaching. I think we probably call that in the trade. Okay, so you're planning to achieve fatigue, planning to train whilst fatigue, but then the period of recovery is sufficiently long that you come back super strong, super fast, super fit there. Okay, but that needs to be well managed. It's probably limited by your experience of training. You wouldn't try that with a novice athlete. Okay, you'd probably try that with a serial a professional, someone with a long training history. There is a situation, there is a scenario where actually you achieve nothing. Okay, you apply a stimulus, you go through a period of recovery. There's a kind of a response. You apply a second stimulus and go back again, but there's no real supercompensation, no real increase over time. Probably reflects my own gym training actually. Either too shorter recovery, or not enough load being applied. Okay. But that is an outcome nonetheless. Worst case scenario is this supercompensation negative here. You apply a load, you recover, but you don't recover enough. You apply a secondary load, you don't recover sufficiently from that. Apply a tertiary load, and you keep going down on a negative spiral. Okay, broadly speaking, this kind of undulation, this peaks and troughs, this kind of undulation to achieve adaptation applies both at the kind of unit level, the nano level, so to speak. So that's within a session, that's within a training day, as well as within a microcycle, a training week, or a mesocycle across a period of weeks, or a macrocycle across a training year. So you'd hope to see that kind of. There are other methods of periodisation for sure, but in very simplistic terms, you'd want periods of high intensity, periods of low intensity, to allow that kind of change to occur over time. Okay. So if you think about it, philosophically, and physically, an acro session or a hand balancing class or practicing your routine on the trapeze, going down to the local circus base on a Thursday night, going down with a friend or whatever, that's not dissimilar from a session in the gym. Okay, you're practicing repetitions of a particular move. You're using body weight or multiplication or tolerating multiplications of body weight in small repeated blocks of time, and you're placing acute stress on particular joints, muscle groups, or regions of the body. Okay, so although I'm talking about gym sessions, and that's where I spend most of my time. You would be taking classes for your performers and your students. But I would see the two as similar things. Okay, is that a fair assumption? Fair assumption to make, or fair leap of faith there. So in terms of the very nano level we talked about, the session itself. If I was to take a player or an athlete or a circus performer into the gym, and we were to do some weighted work, whether it be body weight only, whether it be a barbell or a dumbbell session, what would we likely see immediately after the session, a little bit after the session, and then a number of days after that session. Hopefully this represents it fairly nicely. Double arrow means a big reduction. Single arrow, backwards means a slight reduction. An equal sign means there's no change. And hopefully here, there's no change or there's actually an increase. Okay, all depends on the load of the genetics and the training history. Bear that in mind, please. So if we've just gone in to do a gym strength session, or you've just taken your athlete in and you've done a balancing class, what happens immediately after that session? There's probably a significant reduction in their ability to produce force. They're tired. Okay, that tiredness probably persists for at least an hour after the session. Probably 4 hours. 24 hours after the session, a day later, they're probably back to kind of homeostasis, probably back to normal. Okay, and hopefully in terms of force generation, ability to generate force, there may actually be a slight improvement in that quality by 2 days later. In terms of metabolic readiness, your energy stores and your ability to actually perform it. Immediately after a session, we said, you're tired, you're knackered. Okay, not surprisingly, a reduction in your metabolic function. An hour after training, particularly if you've taken care of your nutrition, your hydration, starting to recover. Probably by 4 hours later, should be back to normal. Okay, and that should last then for the next 2 days. In terms of your muscle tissue itself, the quality of the muscle tissue and how your muscle tissue feels and responds, there's a reduction. Hopefully everyone in the room has felt muscle soreness, muscle tightness after training. That kind of peaks somewhere 4 hours to 24 hours after a session. Their muscles feel tight, feel stiff. The last thing you want to do is go back to the gym on that. When you're feeling that. Okay, but hopefully by 48 hours, probably 72. If you've not trained in some time, or you've done something particularly challenging, it could be up to 72. But from a scientific perspective, should be back to normal within about 48 hours. And then from a mental and cognitive perspective, people, not something that people often think about. Immediately after a session, you probably feel quite good about yourself. There's a lot of research about why that is. That starts to dissipate a little bit. And when you start to feel the muscle soreness, your feelings of how good you are, how good you feel, probably start to dissipate a little bit. But again, 48 hours after that session, you're probably back to baseline again. Okay, maybe even a slight increase again. I've used this in reference to a strength session, but I think you could probably associate that with some of your own gym sessions, your own circus classes. In terms of conditioning, I look at this in broad terms, a conditioning session. Something that not just a circuit class. This could be a track athlete doing multiple repetitions, or it could be an endurance athlete going for a threshold run around the park. But in terms of force generation, immediately after that session, very significantly reduced. Likewise for an hour afterwards, again starts to plateau out around 48 hours. You see a pattern starting to emerge here. Everything 24 to 48 hours later. In terms of metabolic readiness, again immediately after the session, absolutely toast. You can't possibly recreate that effort again. Starts to improve an hour later. By 24 hours you should be back to normal again. Good nutrition, good hydration. Looking after your body. In terms of your muscle tissue again, quite a lot of damage occurring here. Starts to recover in terms of 48 hours. Again, mental and cognitive level. You're collapsed in a heap on the floor. You feel absolutely terrible about yourself. I've definitely been there before. Again, starts to recover within 24 to 48 hours. Okay? Everyone okay with that? At what point would I say it's? Depends on the stimulus. You wouldn't necessarily get an increase unless the stimulus was appropriate. In this instance here, the metabolic change I think this is in kind of simplistic terms. So I look at the force generation, in the conditioning session here.
Yeah.
Here you mean?
Yeah. At what point is that a positive?
Well, say it would start to happen from here on inwards, from here afterwards, but it would be again a multiplication of that stimulus. It wouldn't happen just as a one-off. And again, the stimulus would have to be of the right magnitude. You and I could go for a run now, and we'd still feel tired at the end of the run. And I'd definitely feel bad because you'd beat me on the run. Some similar rules would apply, but unless that stimulus was appropriate, then we wouldn't necessarily see any positive adaptation, to our, to the at the cellular level. Is the word I was looking for. Cellular level. Sorry, go on.
Can I ask something? How will you apply all this to, for example, a dance curriculum when the dancers are having 10 hours a day of dance, not having time to recover, and how will impact this?
That's a very good question. It's a very good question, and I have got a slide coming up that kind of attends to it, and it'll probably lead to quite a nice discussion. I clicked my laser actually. Yes, you there. Yes, yeah, you there. That's all right. Go on.
When you were saying about having the rest times and that.
Sure.
In your graph where you had the rest times, is that by the fact that the equal sign is at 48 and 24 hours, is that saying that like after a session that's how long you want to wait till the equal sign before you do the next one? Is that what you're saying?
I'm going to risk my presentation going horribly wrong here by going backwards quite a few slides. So yeah, it comes back to these kind of multiple, the multiple shapes. So in a wholly scientific perspective, in terms of the body returning to its kind of homeostasis or indeed higher, there's lots of factors involved. Again, it's probably not for the purpose of not for this kind of forum to go into that kind of level of detail. 48 hours is broadly speaking, the amount of time it's going to take to come back to that, to come back to baseline. You may recover. You may be a far better athlete. Your muscle architecture, your training history may be significantly greater than mine, and you may recover quicker. Or the stimulus required for you to achieve adaptation may be significantly higher than the one that I need. So again, I'm using kind of broad numbers. And our friend down here asked that question about curriculums and school timetables, or it comes out to the same question. In an ideal world, 48 hours is fantastic, but who's got 48 hours to be able to wait for that next session? So you need to start thinking and applying some monitoring or some judgment about how hard you push somebody, or how many times you repeat a certain stimulus to avoid the pitfalls.
And so do you have any practical, in terms of this slide with the thing of when you bring the next overload back in, is there a guide for how you know when that point is?
Again, hopefully I'll cover it.
Oh,
No, it's brilliant. I'm pleased everyone's still awake. Actually, it's great. Hopefully the slide towards the end will hopefully cover that for you. In terms of practical methodologies of both measuring and also kind of practical methods to avoid the downsides. If it doesn't, ask me and we'll come back to it. So we're talking about fatigue in general, and it's interesting to note actually that the body elicits a similar hormonal and nervous response to stress, irrespective of the mode. So whether it's we're looking at, in our model here, we're talking about applying an overload, applying stress. That's what that stands for, the S. So applying a stress here, a stimulus. So whether that stress is purely physical, whether it's a physiological one, whether it's a neural, or whether it's a psychological stress, the body needs that same period of undulation to recover. So, with that in mind, with all those different types of fatigue, muscular fatigue, physiological, neural, central fatigue, and psychological, we need methods to be able to measure that. Okay. And again, I live in a very unique bubble in elite sport, and we have lots more time to prepare for events. Largely speaking, we have large support teams around the players and the coaches, and generally speaking, there's more money available to spend on expensive kit to help us do the monitoring. So I'm very aware of that. So in terms of methods to monitor fatigue, I'll give you some examples here. It's not limited to this, but these are some examples. So first we look at very simple training load metrics. If I was going to do a weight session with one of my younger tennis players, we'd look at either the time they're in the gym, we'd look at the number of repetitions they perform times the multiple number of sets that they do, add in the amount of load that they're lifting, and you have a kind of a total training load number. Okay, and over time you could manipulate that. With the use of historically use of heart rate monitors that you actually had to attach. These days you can do it remotely. You can look at heart rate data. You can look at peaks. You can look at recovery times from peaks to baseline, or you can look at time in specific zones of work. You can also start to use GPS technology. I think maybe Will covered that yesterday. Something they do extensively in football. They certainly do it in rugby, and we're just adopting it now in tennis as well. The downside of it largely being an indoor sport, and the extent of movements being very small in tennis. GPS technology wasn't really able to capture the amount of work that players did. The advancement of that technology now means it's a little bit more accurate. The signalling rate is a little bit quicker, and we can actually start to get some interesting data from that. So GPS technology definitely allows you to measure distances covered, accelerations, and kind of a total load of work. Getting a bit sciencey now, histochemical markers, so things like lactate levels, cortisol testosterone ratios, things like that, urine measurements to measure your hydration status, and urine osmolarity and things like that. Also we can use, classically we use jump testing or drop jump measures, a combination of those to give you some kind of reactive strength index, or indeed a fatigue index on those jumps to measure a readiness to training. I've also seen people use hop and hold tests or jump for distances and use that kind of data as a gauge to how ready a player is to perform their next training session. And also subjective monitoring, so things like profile of mood state questionnaires, which can be as few as maybe 2 or 3 key questions. I've definitely seen adjusted and bastardised versions of that kind of profile of mood state stuff. You could just ask in terms of how you're feeling today, or you could go into detail in terms of sleep quality and readiness to train data, or you could just ask them to score their training sessions from that current training session on the sessions that they've done previously in that day, and ask them for a rate of perceived exertion. That's RPE there. And more recently, there's things like sleep metrics, so time in bed, number of hours slept in total, time in kind of deep sleep, those kind of things. They're fairly interesting and reliable markers of somebody's readiness to perform. Now again, this is an environment where you have, you can choose which events you go to enter. You have numbers of weeks to prepare for events. You can substitute players in and out depending on how ready they are to train. And ready they are to perform on a weekend. So, in a small company, if you're one of 3 people who's performing, and you say, do you know what, I didn't sleep very well last night. Actually, I can't be bothered to train today, or I'm not going to make it tonight to that performance, guys. That's just not real world for you guys, and I appreciate that. So, what are the practical implications, and how do you deal with that? Interesting. I found a quote on the way here today. I slotted it in last minute. A sports scientist that I follow on Twitter, he talked about the value of simply asking an athlete how they feel is vastly underrated. And it's all well and good having all that technology at your disposal. And again, in the different jobs that I've worked in, I've used most, if not all, of those methods. Some take longer to actually to collate and then turn the data around and then give to the coach, only for the coach to screw out, throw it over his shoulder and do the same session anyway. So you've got to be confident that the data is going somewhere and it's going to make a difference. But actually, in my latter years of training, this has definitely been what I've used as a more reliable indicator of an athlete's readiness to perform. And as a kind of an anecdotal example, a 21-year-old tennis player that I've been working with for a number of years now. You can start to see that undulation of their training week. This is 3 weeks here, 3 weeks of work, a period of no competition. And across any one week, there's a period of peaks and troughs. The second week that we're going in here, there's some higher peaks, but again, there's a trough down the middle. This week here allows us to be confident that you can complete this. But before I expect him to complete another couple of days of higher intensity, he gets a recovery day. He's always going to get some recovery time at the weekends before again repeating 3 days at a higher level towards the end, and here's competition at the end here. So again, in terms of a nice upward trend, I can hand on heart tell you this is an actual practical example. It doesn't always happen like this, I can assure you. You often have illnesses, incidents or changes in plans that come along. But this is just a nice example of the fact that with that kind of undulation of training, you can end up at a higher point at the end of a period of training than you did at the start. Good question. X-axis here is units of work. So we talked in that previous slide here about training time, and RPE. These units here are a representation of training time times RPE accumulated over a day. So within this is a 1200 unit day. So fairly arbitrary figures, fairly incomparable. A court session and a gym session, different length of time, different intensities, different goals. But in terms of accumulated time, for the sake of argument, that might be, on that given day, it might be 90 minutes of tennis at level 7, and it might be a 60-minute gym session at level 8, and his accumulative time is that. The following day, same thing, tennis plus physical work, tennis plus running work. Third day down here, I imagine he's probably 400 units. Probably get out of bed and go to the shops. It's very low level of work going on down here. But I have to say the challenge in this is actually getting the athlete to report the data to you. Actually, that's the biggest challenge, is getting the athlete to give you the information. And again, it takes some level of trust for you to believe the information, because if they know you're going to adjust the training volume on the back of the numbers that they give you, then a sneaky athlete might start to think, okay, if I give him some really high numbers, he's going to give me a low training day tomorrow. So you've got to hope the athlete wants to get better and wants to achieve greater performances. And likewise, when it comes to total data collection, what I perceive to be a level 8 in an RPE scale, maybe your level 6 or your level 4, depending upon your exposure to training. So again, there's a level of accommodation between you and the athlete to knowing what level is good. For this particular athlete, actually 2,000 is a kind of is a peak number for him. On days and times that we've gone over 2,000 units in a day or done it for multiple days, we start to notice a decrease in his performance the third or fourth day. So for us, 2,000 is generally the highest. There might be the odd blip where he plays 100 minutes instead of 90 minutes that was planned, and as a result of that, in terms of multipliers, his day is slightly higher. But generally speaking, we'd use 2,000 as a guide. So that's simple training metrics, but it still enables us to be able to plan a successful training period. So going back to your question, my exposure to circus, if you will, is largely based around the National Centre for Circus Arts. Excuse me, is that right? Yeah, National Centre for Circus Arts. Let's check with the boss down there. It's regarding students and student circus artists. With those guys in mind, they're here term time only, and they're here for 5 days a week. Their days are between 9 and 5. Generally speaking, 60 to 90 minute classes with a 60 minute lunch in between. and classes are based on the availability of space and teachers. Okay. They do have support services available, but not necessarily full time. Okay. So if they get injured, there is a physio available to them. There is a referral system to sports physicians. But it's not full time. But it is. And it's free to use as well. So by way of kind of questions, or by way of observations, what challenges does that throw up to me as a physical trainer? And in terms of particularly their training versus their adaptation. So your question here is probably quite pertinent. If the sessions are based upon the availability of space and teachers, then you could often find themselves, the students could find themselves having classes back to back that are hugely physical. They could end up having 3 or 4 sessions of that in a day, and then the next day having all theory lectures. So by chance, they could have a high intensity day followed by a low intensity day, which is fine and gives us some undulation. But if they're tired going into their second session as a result of their first session, are you necessarily going to see the adaptation and physical performance that you might want? So if you're lucky enough to get the student's first session, you might get a fantastic session out of them. But the session, the second teacher may struggle to get the best out of them, or the student goes into that first session knowing they've got 3 or 4 long, hard physical sessions in a row, and perhaps keep something in the locker for those second and third sessions. In terms of my practical observations, some of the things I thought, perhaps I can throw it out there. Perhaps I would organise practical sessions for the start of the day. and or at the end of the day. So you've got any physical work is happening at the antipodes of the day. Yeah, or ideally you're doing one early in the day on all days. The rest of the day becomes theory, completely dependent on the timetable and the path that the students choose. Again, this may be applicable when it comes to a first year student where there's lots of things they're covering. As they start to specialise in the second and third years, then that may not be maybe not so possible. And as I mentioned there, I'd intersperse heavy physical days with theory days. So break up the physical sessions, with theory, or have days which you know are going to be high intensity, but then have a couple of days where you know that they're going to get to recover from a physical, let alone an emotional and a psychological perspective. Quite a lot of study at the moment talking about the implications of study on physical performance. In a lot of sports, we encourage athletes to have outside interests and undertake professional studies. But obviously that does place another stress. We talked about the different types of stress. If that's placing a cognitive or a logistical stress on their lives, then that probably has an effect on their physical performance as well. So we're doing the right thing for the right reason, but does it have another effect? So that's our Circus Arts student. How about a professional circus artist? Well, if we think about it in terms of somebody does it as a full-time job but is not out and about the whole year. They train around their full-time job, so they have a full-time job as well. Probably have family commitments, and hopefully they've got social commitments as well. They probably would practice 3 times a week, often before or after work. Effectively, they're amateur athletes, amateur artists, but with full-time jobs. Sessions could last anything up to 2 hours at a time. And they would probably have a modest budget for support services, if they're lucky. Okay. How would I get around that? Well, again, I'd probably organise practical sessions at the start of the day, not the end of the day. We talked about the effect of stress, and long tiring days of work. Even if it's sitting down behind a computer screen doing administrative work, that's going to have an effect on your ability to perform physically at the end of the day. Or you reorder your week to allow non-consecutive training days. So train maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Don't necessarily front load your training to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and have the rest of the week to recover. Okay. The third group would probably be a touring professional artist. Again, in the process of writing some of this material, I spoke to Glenn at length, and he happened to be standing next to a full-time touring artist. And I said, "Come on, give me a rough idea of your normal day." He said, "Well, I'd probably do 7 shows in 6 days. The rest day would probably be the travel day. Probably doing that for 6 months in a row. And you know what? Because of that, different country every week. Absolutely no access to any support services unless I happen across a physio in one of the towns that we visit. And we've got enough flexibility in the kind of petty cash till to pay for a physio. Otherwise, we just have to suck it up and crack on." Okay. Very admirable, very impressive that you'd still be able to perform under those circumstances. Probably not good for the immediate health and well-being of the athlete, or indeed their long-term career as a professional. Hopefully that's something that James will talk about in a little while. How would I deal with that as a physical trainer? If that circus artist was phoning me up from the other side of the world and saying, "Look, what do I do? How am I going to get around this problem?" I'd say, "Do you know what? Let's shorten your practice sessions as far as possible." Okay, so culturally, you'd still go into the arena, the gym, the studio, whatever you use, and you'd put in kind of 120 minutes of practice. That practice is still very fatiguing, very physical. Perhaps shorten that practice as far as you possibly can. Do the key things, maintain the intensity of the work that you're doing to retain the stimulus, but don't then add volume into that, because that's only going to make the problem worse. Likewise, I'd optimise the practical interventions, which we'll come on to in a second. The practical interventions. These are all evidence-based interventions. I can give you the research that's behind this. A lot of it is, some of it is very old. Some of it has been, is equivocal, and some of it is being challenged right now. But if I was a betting man, if you followed all those things, I'm pretty sure you'd feel a damn sight better than if you did none of them. Okay, so where time allows, where the facilities allow, where your preferences lie, I would apply as many as you possibly can to maximise your recovery post-performance. So in here we have sleep, very simply. That covers both our physiological and our psychological well-being. Cryotherapy, so the use of ice baths, cold water immersion, that kind of thing, whole body cryotherapy, or indeed contrast bathing, going from hot to cold temperatures. Compression garments, so if you're watching the rugby over the last few days, in between matches, the players would often wear kind of tights, support tights, running tights underneath their shorts. It's not a fashion accessory, it's not for appearance. For the most part, it's for this benefit of the compression that it's providing. Soft tissue massage, predominantly the kind of the lighter effleurage version, in terms of stimulating the kind of lymphatic kind of work. Reflexology, and in particular antioxidant supplementation. There's lots of research at the moment about cherry juice, tart cherry juice, and beetroot ingestion. If I was you, I'd go for the cherry, not the beetroot. One tastes definitely better than the other. But in terms of psychological well-being, sleep comes across both categories. Is that personal experience there, is it? Okay. And when you start peeing red as well, don't panic, it's the beetroot. Power naps, again, often underutilised. Definitely encourage those with the athletes that we work with. Those rock, yeah. I have to say I'm not an expert in any of those sports, but I have to say I'm I'm an Olympic level sleeper and power napper. So I'd be a definite advocate of those. Again, the trick is to maintain be careful in terms of the length of time. If you're really tired, you'll go into phase 2 sleep very quickly. And when you wake up from phase 2 sleep, you kind of walk around for the next 40 minutes, an hour, feeling quite groggy. If you've got to go and perform, not great for performance, probably not safe in your environment actually. Or in a rugby pitch, or less so on a tennis court. The danger you get hit by a tennis ball. But even still, you want to avoid that kind of sleep latency that happens after a deep sleep. So you want to try and limit it. Know your body. Know how little sleep is required to achieve some kind of feeling of well-being, but not so much that you go into that deep sleep. Hypnosis, can't say I've used that one myself, but again, people swear by it in terms of their psychological well-being, in terms of meditation, music, and aromatherapy. Again, about feeling good. Okay. So in terms of practical interventions while you're on the road, most of those are achievable without much expense. And if it means you're recovering better from the previous day's performance, or allows you to perform better in the next one, it's worth investigating. I scoured the internet, and again, the same physiologist that posted that quote earlier. He's got some fantastic little infograms which are stolen for the purpose of the presentation today. But if you were to produce some of these for your artists, simple guidelines, simple tips to help them recover between events. I think if they use it as a tick sheet or a tick list almost, then I think you can't go wrong. So simple steps to improve your sleep. So not using your phone or watching the television immediately before you're going to sleep. Getting into routines, sleeping in, taking your own pillow rather than different pillows. Different things like that. In terms of power nap here, we're talking about minimising the time and the environment. Try and make sure you're in a quiet environment to do so. Although actually there's quite a lot of evidence suggesting just shutting your eyes and relaxing, even if you don't fall asleep, can be quite helpful. Another one on massage there. Some people believe in it, some people don't, but again, there's the assumed benefits. And one often overlooked, and again, work with travelling tennis players. They travel the world. Sometimes their favourite foods aren't available in the supermarkets. They don't trust the food that's available to them. I understand that. So sometimes you might need to travel with your own snacks and your own supplies just in case. It's worth the extra money that it's going to cost you in terms of your luggage. There's an acute need to replace the water and the fluids that you lose, as well as the energy that you've burned. So there's an acute hydration, nutrition focus, but also a longer term, in terms of your recovery from the muscle damage that's created as well. So not just kind of immediate nutrition, but also nutrition for longer term performance. So I'm conscious of the time in front of me and making sure we've got enough time for questions. Hopefully, we've done enough to give you a brief idea there of how organising training appropriately would minimise fatigue, or at least enough to stimulate some thought and some discussion, and also methods to optimise your recovery post-performance and pre-next performance. They don't all work for everybody, and again, it's definitely a trial and error thing whereby you have to see what's good for you, what works for you, and what feels best for you. And if you're working with a group of students or a touring company, then it's important that you find out what works best for them as individuals rather than forcing your ideas onto them. Okay. So thank you all for your time and your patience and your concentration. I'm very happy to answer any questions, and if I don't know the answers, I will very happily go and try and find the answers for you and get them back to you at some point. Who wants to be first? Oh God, lots of questions. Usually you ask that and everyone keeps their hands down and wants to go to the break, and now there's lots of questions.
So you're mentioning cryotherapy and cold baths.
Yes.
Back in the day when I was going through my training, they were always saying, "Oh, take a hot bath and be in a warm bath to help you recover." Do you now recommend that actually cold baths are much more productive? And if you don't have a bath, is a shower similarly worthwhile?
A regular bath or a shower, so it's good to know. I definitely remember, I look back at my own kind of participation in sports events, and I definitely remember being in the bath, after playing football or rugby or doing judo. At that time, that was the best intervention. Through my own studies, you learn about these other things. I definitely have applied cryotherapy, kind of ice baths. I've definitely been that guy making athletes jump into binfuls of ice cold water. Because at the time the research said best thing for them. I now believe that one, it doesn't need to be ice cold, it's just cold, and secondly, the acute response would probably be better for a rugby player where there's impact forces and there's an acute swelling going on. I'm not sure whether I would use that with a distance runner who, one's probably not got much muscle tissue and will probably suffer from the cold quite quickly. And two, the nature of the physical response he's looking for might be numbed and dulled by using the cold water immersion. So, have I used in the last few weeks cold water immersion for some of the young tennis players? Yes, because they want to do it, they've asked to do it, it makes them feel better the next day. So, from a psychological perspective, I'd be stupid not to capitalise on that. From a physiological perspective, I'm not sure it's giving them what they think it is. So I'd make sure that I do a proper warm down, but make sure they're doing an appropriate stretching regime, make sure they're getting their nutrition in a timely fashion. I know I'm ticking my boxes. If they want to get in the ice bath as well, and they think it's doing them some good, then do you know what? It's going to help.
And just shortly, how long would you say to stay in an ice bath or something like that? When things start going blue, I think off the top of my head, I think the research is somewhere 7 and 10 minutes. But it depends upon your previous exposure, and your how cold the water is, and the outcome you're looking to achieve. So if it's an acute swelling thing like in a rugby match, then you could definitely be in there longer. If it's to make them feel like they're going to feel better the next day. Then you could probably be a little spend less time in there. Are you thinking with regards to performers specifically, or just with regards to cheerleaders actually? So I imagine the same sort of impact that rugby players get is happening for those cheerleaders too. It's been measured as actually worse in some cases.
In terms of, you mean in terms of the kind of lifts and holds and landing and things like that?
Throwing and catching people.
Okay. I hadn't thought about it in those terms. Maybe, certainly. I'll have a look for it. It's usually for bigger muscle masses. It's usually for kind of lower limb things like that. Not necessarily for upper bodies. Less muscle tissue. Less protective skin. It probably suffer from the colder quicker. Again, the research doesn't. It's not usually sauna kind of temperature. It would normally be warm water into kind of warm water, cold shower, warm water, cold shower, hot shower, cold shower, hot shower, cold shower. Kind of 3 on 1, 3 hot, 1 cold, that kind of strategy. And again, the magnitude of gain is going to be marginal, but you'll feel better. The most researched and the most effective is going to be an effective warm down. So some kind of cyclical activity to kind of remove any kind of accumulated waste products and things like that. But again, having not performed as a circus artist, I don't know what they're feeling when they come off stage. I don't know, where their fatigue is and how they feel. But warm and cold rather than hot and freezing, I would probably suggest.
Hi, Aaron. Hi. Thanks for the talk. I have a question regarding refueling and rehydrating, because it's a question that I get asked a lot by clients. Firstly, hydrating throughout the training day and at the end of a training session. They often ask what's better, plain water with some carbohydrate, and I'd be led to believe that sort of 5-6% sugar level within your water is best for rehydrating the body. But that's something I was told about maybe 5-6 years ago. I'm wondering if there's anything more up to date regarding guidelines.
I mean, again, this guy's a physiologist, so the depth of my nutrition is not as good as this guy. The physiologists and nutritionists will be far stronger in terms of that area. But just in his kind of tick sheet here, he's suggesting kind of 150% of weight loss. So that's in terms of a total volume of fluid. Again, in a sports setting, often cases you would measure athletes going onto a training pitch, measure them when they come off, see the change in their weight, and use that as a guide in terms of how much fluid loss through sweating. So volume is important. What you are replacing again depends upon you as an individual in terms of the content of the salt content of your sweat. Heavy sweaters or salty sweaters, as they would be referred to, would need a higher concentration to replace their fluid than a lower sweater and a less salty sweater. So it's dangerous to give you kind of broad numbers, but I would probably go for an electrolyte solution over plain water, because the electrolytes is the main constituent of the water that you're losing. And the sugar that you're consuming also is going to help with the recovery process, not just the rehydration part. So if you start to take on board here, they're talking about protein here in terms of immediately post and then kind of longer term post performance. That carbohydrate will help you synthesize that protein. No carbohydrate means the protein synthesis is going to be nulled, or dampened. So you definitely need some sugar in there anyway. So I'll find out in terms of a percentage for you, but I'll definitely go, electrolyte versus water, if you've got it. If you haven't, then hydration. Hydration is the key versus not hydrating. So don't not hydrate because you haven't got electrolyte solution. Get the water inside you quickly. I work with a couple of nutritionists who are, that's their, don't worry about the powders, just drink. You need the water, you need the fluid. So that's their priority. If you've got access to it, then definitely include it.
You had a couple of little graphs about the recovery post-session. You had one on strength and one on conditioning. They were like little tables. What would you say about flexibility?
Yeah, it's important. The world you're in, obviously the performers have been doing. There's flexibility. There's range of range of motion. There's how long to achieve an adaptation. You mean?
Yeah.
Some of it's going to be dictated by their own physical, their anatomy, their own anatomy. Some of it's going to be dictated by their tissue, the muscle tissue and their soft, the connective tissue and the soft tissue. Again, it's a question of how often they're going to practice it. There's definitely a stimulus response. In terms, applying the stimulus and the response time. I don't think I could put I'm not comfortable enough to put a number on in terms of how long it's going to take. Put it out there to the room. What are your thoughts? You deal with Bendy Wendy's more often than I do, so. That's not meant to be disrespectful or kind of glib, but yeah, you deal with guys that have got far greater range of movements and far stronger in those range of movements than I'll ever see. So,
I'd suggest from my experience that if you don't get change within the session that's measurable, then you didn't get a change. And it's the accumulation of those changes that will lead to that range of motion that you are ultimately looking for.
And how, I'm asking, turn the tables now, I'm asking him questions. And how long would you expect that acute response to last? And how long would it take then for you to feel there's a chronic change?
I think that would be dose dependent,
Dose
right? Like
okay.
dose
Yeah.
response depending on the frequency. But in that moment, I would expect to see some kind of a change. Otherwise, I don't think there's a super compensation to flexibility. I think it happens or it doesn't happen in that moment, just based on my experience and current knowledge.
It's possible to overstretch in a session and be injured, and then you will be on that negative trend, that negative chart.
Sorry to shout out, sorry everyone. I was just saying you can also overstretch in a session, and that can result in a tear. And then once you're injured, then you're not going to recover in 2 days. You're actually going to take longer to recover, and then it's a downwards trend, like those charts you were showing.
I'd probably refer to the physio, but it may be something you're going to talk about, in a little while, James.
When it comes to stretching, there's a lot of literature in the scientific world about stretching. What's the best type? There's lots of different ways about going about stretching, and there's some interesting work that's been done, particularly with in the States over the past few years, about how to improve mobility using accessories like bands and things like that. So, but in terms of getting an injury after a stretching session, that's often a massive problem, because then you can't go back into a flexibility session and expect to get gains, because if you're stretching a tissue that's acutely traumatized or inflamed, then that stretching session is going to provoke a further inflammatory reaction. So you have to think always, come back to the objective of your training session. Your objective is to get more flexible, but if you've had a little injury or picked up a little tear during a heavy flexibility session, it's not wise to go about another one until they're settled down, or work on another area downstream or upstream, while that area that's a little bit torn heals up a little bit. But it's very dependent on the independent person.
I experience the worst muscle pain always like 2 days later. Is that, and also this is like in parallel with, so why is that? And then also I was always sort of, the instinct was, and just from experience, that when it hurts that much, the only way to get over it is to go and do it again. And that's always what I've trained with, is like, wow, the next day or 2 days later, it's really painful, and then the only way you get that to be not that painful anymore is to do the same thing again.
I definitely, as a physical trainer or strength coach, or whatever you want, athletic development, practitioner, whatever people call me. In fact, I get called a lot of nasty names actually, but those are the titles that I generally operate within. I'm often guilty of saying, "I'll just suck it up, crack on." There's definitely, you've got to encourage some people to push through. There's a difference between discomfort and pain, and the nature of the work we're doing. I'm trying to cause disruption to the muscle fibres and to the connective tissues to achieve an outcome. So there's some of that is going to be necessary. But it's the body's way of saying, in kind of, again, in broad terms, the body's way of saying, okay, something's going on here, we're doing some repair work, and if you're unable to get that same depth, it's because the muscles are being really challenged. So just pushing through it isn't necessarily the best course of action. On each occasion you kind of take each situation on its merits. Why in particular your muscle soreness is 2 days, 2 days later? It's maybe a reflection of the work that you're doing, or the nature of the training that you've done, the degree of the stimulus that you've applied, or the other interventions that you've tried to try and minimise that, or accelerate that recovery and maximise the adaptation. So if it's 2 days later, you might not have been applying other interventions to try and speed that process up, or it may mean that you're just lifting such heavy weights and training so hard that your soreness is greater than the rest of ours, or that population that was used in that study there. But 2 days, you can definitely. I think the peak of the discomfort is probably around that period. I don't think it has to disappear completely. I think that refers to the kind of peak in terms of the force and discomfort in terms of the muscle tissue, not necessarily you have no pain at all. Wouldn't disappear, wouldn't clear completely. Sorry, yes.
We're just at the Dance UK conference with Strength and Conditioning Dance a couple days ago.
My friend Nick was presenting, I think.
Yeah, and one of the presenters had just done his PhD on stretching and was trying to figure out, I guess, the level of stretching to what degree and what effect it would have on a cellular level in the muscles. And what he had found, just from, as a brief overlay of what he had said, was that aggressive stretching causes inflammation on a cellular tissue level within the muscles. So the reason why lots of people, if you were to do aggressive stretching back to back over an accumulated number of days, and then a couple days later are very, very sore, well, it's because there's an accumulation of inflammation, and it ends up kind of not being able to be dispersed, and you're not giving enough healing time. So it's the same thing with the strength and conditioning, as you were just saying, where you add a stimulus, you need that kind of rest and recovery time in order to get that response. But that's happening on a cellular level. And from what he had explained was that you could get, looking past 72 hours later, you'd get the same result with passive stretching on a 30 to 40% of your perceived maximum range of motion as you would if you were going into 80 or 90%. So, but because he had looked past 48 hours, he had looked from 72 hours later and longer, and the range of motion was actually the same. So, but on a tissue level, there was less damage, which is what you want, because if there's too much inflammation, then you get more scar tissue, and later on that ends up tightening up. So, in a long-term scale, your tissues will be in a better condition.
So you said 30 or 40% of your total stretch?
Of your
stretch length?
Perceived maximum range of motion.
And over how many days did he say?
Pardon?
Do you remember how many days he said? Did you quote a number of days that you had to follow that regimen for?
I think I'd have to kind of pull up my notes on what his presentation.
Well, I'm going to search out the notes.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that he did a study with them over a period of time, and basically, I can't remember the exact time period on that, but it was kept consistent between randomized trials with a control group, people that were doing kind of 30 to 40%, and ones that were kind of consistently stretching to 80 or 90%, so that pain tolerance was reached, and the gains were the same, but on a tissue level it was safer. So that's just a little bit of what I got.
It's good insight.
But I took that in a really good place.
So as you say, if it achieves a similar or improved outcome, with less discomfort over the period of time, then that's
But considering the fact that you're stretching, plus you're doing strength and conditioning as well, on top of that interspersed, you're still going to get an inflammation response. But if you accumulate them on top of each other, so if you're getting inflammation response on the tissue level, and from flexibility, plus you're getting inflammation response from the strength and conditioning, then you're adding on top of that. So
it's an additive,
exactly. So you'd want stretching to be more of a healing process than adding more inflammation.
If you're doing it at the same time as other stress, you don't want a double whammy effect where
exactly.
you're dampening the effect of one on the other.
Just a quick question. When you're looking at this session, you're looking at strength and conditioning. But if you go in and do a technical class, what you said, technical adaptation, I think?
Yeah.
So if I just go in and do my technique, but not pushing it, not pushing strengthening within it, could that be done in the days in between? Or would you still count that as a session?
See, again, I suppose this is the distinction between a kind of an art and the kind of scientific approach to it, in that I would see, even though you're doing a technical session, if you're hanging from a trapeze, there's significant load going through your wrists, your elbows, your shoulders, your trunk to maintain form. If you're doing a hand balancing class, you might be practicing your technique, but there's still a lot of work being done. So although you see it, although you bracket it as technique work, it's a very physical technique that you're practicing. So I would look at it from there'd definitely be a physiological cost to that work, and I'd probably apply those principles around it. Now, of course, it's as best I know, there's not much research out there in terms of the forces that are going through the wrists or the elbows or the shoulders when you're doing those things. So it's difficult to equate it to loaded work that I might do with a football player in the gym. But it's still work, and you still want to try and minimise the overreaching process, and you want to maximise your recovery to improve your performance in the longer term. So that's I suppose it's not semantics, but because it's seen as technique, people go, oh, it's just a technique class, so it's fine. But having seen some of and again, it's just an example here, having seen some of the technique classes, I'm thinking, wow, that's an impressive amount of work that they've just done there. But they see it as technique and have got another class to go to after that. And it's that kind of loading one on top of the other, with the potential risk of either overreaching in the short term or illness and injury in the longer term. That's the way I'd look at it.
Just want to
you woke him up.
Contribute to what Stephanie was saying about the inflammation following stretching intervention. I think it would be a very important distinction for everyone to make between stretching as a modality and the group of interventions that's available to increase the active range of motion that the athlete or the performer can achieve.
Mobility.
And that stretching, mobility. So that stretching is one method that you can use, and we don't need to, but we could enter a debate whether it's a meaningful activity to gain that range of motion, or are there other ways, such as, for example, discussed yesterday, to achieve similar or bigger gains without the inflammation.
Sure, absolutely. No, it's a good clarification. Not to use them interchangeably.
Hello. Yeah. So I'd just like to add about stretching that there's a lot of literature showing that actually it's not increasing muscle length, and that actually most stretching protocols that had been tested are not working. But actually, if we look at the facts, it is for circus artists, they are getting more flexible. And there's a really interesting book from Lederman, which is a chiropractor, and who's saying that if you need to increase your range of motion, you need either to do a massive amount of stretching, which is what they do in dance, for example, or way easier, either for, he's talking about normal patients, but it works with circus artists too, is to implement the new range of motion directly into your movement. And so that if you want to gain range of motion, it's actually about changing the way you're moving and your daily behaviors. And that, in a day, look, let's say you want to increase your hamstring flexibility. If you start bending every day using your hamstring flexibility, you're very much more likely to increase your range of motion than if you're doing 10 minutes a day just of stretching. And I guess also you won't have the risk of injuries. So.
I guess in most cases it's joint range that the circus performers would crave rather than muscle length, just to allow them to perform the tricks, but skills that they're required. Before Glenn hoiks me off the stage here, thank you again for your time and for your questions. No one actually talked about the kind of the interventions that we were talking with regards to the circus students or the full-time performers, which obviously is quite pertinent to you guys. So if you want to carry on that discussion afterwards, or we want to exchange messages, I'll be more than happy to kind of to facilitate that. So other than that, thank you very much indeed.